Hey everybody, I'm Scotty J. You are watching Rock Titan Music Television. Got a very special guest with us today. It's pretty amazing because, as you all know, there's a lot of moving parts in the music industry. And for me personally, having worked with so many photographers and sound techs and things of that nature, I think perhaps one of the most unheralded professionals in the industry is that of the concert photographer. And we just happen to have a legend with us today. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Robert M. Knight. Mr. Knight, how are you, sir?
Good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. What a career you've had. I mean, it would blow the mind, I don't think, just of any other concert photographer in the industry, but just so many other industry professionals. It's incredible. Again, we were just talking about it kind of off the record. You were one of the very first photographers to ever shoot Led Zeppelin. I mean, you were familiar with them before they ever even came over to the United States.
Yep.
You know, and then you were the very last photographer to shoot Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah, he was a really good friend of mine.
Wow. I mean, so having been through that, knowing that you're such a rich part of history, I mean, do you ever, is that something that you've been able to articulate to other photographers?
I mean, I've been with Nikon for 50 years. I've been using their products for 50 years, and many years with them. And I've been going to places like South by Southwest, representing them and talking to and inspiring young filmmakers and photographers, and talking about what it was like back in the day as compared to today, which is a completely different story for a young photographer wanting to start out in the business, which is almost virtually impossible, both financially and getting access. But back in the day, there were very few of us. There might have been 10 serious music photographers back in '68.
Wow. What inspired you to want to get into concert photography specifically?
Well, I grew up in Hawaii, and my parents were like missionaries and, in the religious field, and I was denied the ability to go to movies and listen to rock music, but somehow I managed to anyway, if you know what I mean.
Right on.
And I snuck out, and I managed to see the Rolling Stones as a very young kid. I might have been 14 or 15, and they had Brian Jones in the band. And when I went there were 8,500 people screaming, flash bulbs. There was this energy in the room, and I was just like, it caused me to have like these, chicken skin flesh going on. And I knew I had to be part of this.
Wow. But
I didn't know how, since I wasn't musically inclined, nor did I play the guitar, and I had to figure out a way.
Right.
So I started buying through mail order out of England these records before they were released in America. And I was able to get like the Kinks and the Pretty Things and the Yardbirds and the Who and the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix even. I had 6 months before it came out in America.
Wow.
And I was playing it on my high school PA. I was like a DJ before anybody knew what it was. But I wanted to get to England. I knew I had to get to England. At 15, I became a travel agent, believe it or not. And after you work for a certain period of time, you're eligible for 2 passes a year as an employee. Right. And I took mine, and I got a first-class ticket to London, and I spent the summer there. And they happened to be making a movie at the time called Blow Up with David Hemmings, and the Yardbirds were in it.
Wow.
And that was my inspiration. I could be a photographer, and that could be my passport into this world. And so with that in mind, I went back to Honolulu. I caddied for a year. I caddied for Jerry Lewis. I caddied for a whole lot of very interesting people at a private country club in Hawaii.
Wow.
And got enough money to buy a Nikon and 3 lenses. And then I went, okay, now I'm going to be a photographer. So it was like, okay, now what do? How do I get access? So that was during the Vietnam War. My parents were concerned I was going to be drafted. They said, you need to get into a college. And I read somewhere, probably in Rolling Stone or one of those type of magazines at the time, that in the summer of '68, Bill Graham was bringing all those bands through the summer and fall to the Fillmore. So I found a photography school in San Francisco, convinced my parents this is where I needed to go. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. and I basically went to this school, and Annie Leibovitz was my classmate. But I basically was up all night at the Fillmore and then printing pictures and going back to the Fillmore the next day to show them to the band. And I developed a relationship with a lot of people very early on, particularly Jeff Beck. And Jeff's the one that told me, he said, you're not going to believe this band that Jimmy Page has got, what he's going to be coming out with. So I had the heads up. I was always a Yardbird fan. And I knew it was coming, and I convinced John Weiner, Rolling Stone, to send me to LA to photograph the band at the Whiskey A Go Go, a 200-seat venue.
Right on.
And I went down there very proudly going, I'm with Rolling Stone magazine. And the lady at the box office said, how old are you? And I told her, and she said, you can't get in here. You got to be 21. It's a bar. And I'm like, but wait, I got to shoot this band. I'm with Rolling Stone. She said, hold on. She called the hotel, the Chateau Marmont, got Jimmy on the phone, and he had me come over to the hotel. And I spent the entire day hanging out with Led Zeppelin. They were so excited anybody was interested. I met Tiny Tim, who was hanging out with them. I don't know why he was there, but he was there. And Jimmy had me call my friends in Hawaii, and he was talking to them on the phone, and and it was pretty cool. And they brought me in as road crew, and so they weren't even opening. And Jimmy kept saying, "Oh, we're opening for some chick band." That's all I remember him saying. But anyway, I snuck in with Led Zeppelin as road crew, shot them, and then went completely nuts, and then flew up to San Francisco with him a couple of days later, shot him again, and then convinced the promoter in Hawaii to bring him over.
Wow.
And so then I would be in Honolulu when they arrived, and I took one of my most famous pictures, which is Led Zeppelin arriving at the Honolulu airport.
I saw it, yeah.
Their hands and stuff. But, that was the thing, and then I got in with the local promoters and the local DJs in Hawaii, and I really pushed them to bring in these bands that I liked, and they did. I got a DJ friend of mine to play Aerosmith, and they broke probably one of the first cities they broke outside of Boston, came over to my house for breakfast because they were so excited about this whole thing. So it's been this kind of interesting thing. And then these bands would hang out in Hawaii, either, at the end of a tour or on their way to Japan. So, the record companies used to give me money and say, well, look after Alice Cooper for 10 days, or can you drive Led Zeppelin around and take them out to dinner for a few nights? And so that's sort of kind of the relationship part of it developed,
All right, Ed. So everybody watching right now, are your heads exploding yet? Because this is a mind blow. Seriously, Robert. I mean, this is incredible. And the sad thing is, really, there's, like you kind of alluded to earlier, there's no concert photographers today that are likely going to ever experience anything close to what you had the opportunity to experience.
I'm waiting for that renaissance to happen, but so far it's become rather. I've seen it before kind of thing. There's all these exciting bands, but they sound like other bands that I photographed 50 years ago, or they're so not visually exciting, I don't even want to photograph them because the whole swagger seems to have gone out of rock music to a degree, right? And in my mind, Slash is probably the last guitar hero. You could take a picture of his shadow.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah. So my wife and I both. My wife's also a rock and roll photographer, Marianne Billum, and we were doing all these photos on the outsides of the Guitar Center. 3,000 10-foot photos, probably the largest outdoor photo exhibition ever. And you would drive by a Guitar Center and you would know who all those people were.
Right.
If I put up the guitar players of all the major bands today, nobody would know who they are.
Oh my God. Well,
I mean, would you recognize a picture of the guy from Muse?
Probably not.
Or the Killers? Or
no.
I mean,
for me personally, yeah. No, I mean, that's a great point.
Not an offensive thing to say. It's just there isn't the visual swagger. You put a picture up of Steven Tyler and everybody knows who it is. Your grandma knows who it is, and the 10-year-old knows who it is.
Yeah. It's just amazing, though. I mean, and before we get into some other subjects that I just definitely want to talk to you about in terms of the evolution of technologies as a whole with social media and then going from traditional film to digital, my God, I mean, how crazy that had to have been. But are you still actively working as a concert photographer? Do you still do it?
My wife and I just got hired to shoot Journey Def Leppard tour. We were out in 4 or 5 major shows.
Nice.
We were with Splash in Phoenix. My wife is a lot more active probably than I am. She does a lot of stuff with Santana.
Okay.
And Def Leppard brought her over to Ireland to shoot their tour posters.
Wow.
So, but I'm more involved with shooting and helping younger bands who haven't even emerged yet. That's where the excitement lies for me now. And so
all right.
I have a whole lot of very young artists that I support and help them with their photography and help them, connect. And, there we go.
All right. And we're going to get into that because there are some specific artists that I definitely want to bring up because obviously we wouldn't be talking today otherwise. But just in terms of the evolution of technology, I mean, you talk about how you got to meet these people and you get into the venues and, you create these relationships. Nowadays, you've got social media, and I know for me, working as a journalist, you got to reach out to the publicists. If you're lucky enough to get their information, you email them, and then you get caught up in this, communication chain, and, everything gets coordinated and whatnot. But obviously, back in, when you first got started, that kind of communication didn't exist. There was no 24/7 news cycle, I mean,
publicist per se.
I mean, how did you
would just contact the band and they were happy to see you.
Really?
A good example would be in the fall of 1968, Jimi Hendrix was going to play the Winterland Ballroom. Okay. So I bought a $3.50 ticket. I had a camera in my hand, and I started to walk toward the front of the stage, and everybody got out of my way because I had a camera. And walked right to the bottom of the stage. Wow. And I shot, and no one stopped me.
Wow.
I don't think security guards existed then. I don't remember seeing any. And I shot, and then somebody from the band would come over and say, "Hey, when can we see the pictures?" You know what I mean? I mean, that was the sort of, and you couldn't, you didn't take a picture and then look at the back of your camera, and then take a picture and look at the back of your camera. You had to know what you were doing, and sometimes you had to wait days before you saw the result.
Right. So let's just jump ahead, because actually it's funny. My wife's a professional photographer. She's been doing it for some time, but I'll be lucky if I can actually drag her out to any shows with me, because concert photography is just not her thing, although she's good at it. But I had to drag her kicking and screaming back in the day from traditional film and developing her own, photographs into the digital world. I'm like, hon, the digital world, that's where it's going. For you, having already worked in, traditional film, did you, well, I guess, I have to ask you, did you make the transition into digital, or do you still go old school?
I basically had to, because my clients would ask for me, if I was going to shoot film, they'd ask me to go get a scan first and bring them a digital file.
Oh, wow.
So it became inevitable that I needed to go to digital, because to save a step, because it was very expensive getting a drum scan back in the day off of a transparency. Right. So I went into digital. I didn't like it at first because the quality was nowhere near the depth. The D-Max was nowhere near what film was. Okay. But it evolved, and I learned to play with it. But then a whole other reality happened. No longer are you a photographer. You're a post-production person. You're a Photoshop guy, or you're a plug-in guy. So there was all this endless amount of stuff you had to constantly learn. And then pretty soon the playing field became, everybody was a photographer.
Right, anyone with a camera.
Everybody was shooting. So therefore, where you used to make a lot of money in the stock business or providing it for magazines, the bottom fell out, so that there was no longer any real money in it, because there were kids out there willing to do it for free or for nothing, and or little money. And so the whole thing became changed, but then it changed at the same time for record producers and for people that pressed vinyl. I mean, the whole digital age changed everything. And now, of course, we have the problem where no longer is anybody going to sell physical copies of CDs. So now artists are in a whole new thing. Right. Like, no longer, no one even has a device to play a CD on.
Right. So I guess, I don't even know if it's worth asking you this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Right. Your thoughts on the digital age and how it changed the music industry as a whole, both for musicians and for photographers, better or worse?
Well, I think if you're smart, you can still do really well in it, but at the same time, the days of going into a recording studio and paying $2,500 a day and having a mega producer with a budget of $200,000 to do an album are gone.
Right.
And a lot of the bigger bands don't know how to wrap their head around that. They don't know how to work into a $30,000 album. And the whole concept of an album or a CD or even an EP is a broken concept, because now it's all about singles.
Right.
So literally, if you're smart, you would just go into the singles business and just produce a single every 3 to 4 months and release that, as opposed to putting out, 6 tracks that Apple will only promote one of,
Right.
So, but then it creates a whole new paradigm for artists that now have to live off touring or merchandise.
Wow.
Because you're not going to make the money off physical sales.
Right. Well, talking about media, and products that you are able to sell anymore, from what I understand, you've got a new book that's going to be coming out, Rock Gods Volume 2.
It's done really well. It's a second version of Rock Gods.
Right.
I did about 8-10 years ago called Rock Gods, and it sold out.
Okay.
And that was a very expensive hardback book, and we brought out a more economical book so younger kids could buy it. We updated it, and we've done really well.
So this is already out?
It is out. It came out in January, but I've been doing gallery shows in Canada and the U.S. around it. I did some big interviews with CNN. I mean, it's done really, really well.
Right on.
But even book publishing has changed because of digital, and nowhere to buy physical books anymore other than Amazon.
Right.
So, everything has changed because of digital. And then, of course, you're watching in the political arena what's happened now with social media, in that you can totally do anything, lie or cheat or whatever you want to do, and it suddenly becomes believable because people see it on the internet or they hear it on TV. So we live in a world right now where everything is you just don't really know what to do, whether the hype is real, whether a band is real, or whether they're playing to, even if they're playing live,
Right.
A lot of bands are playing to tracks nowadays.
Right. Well, again, everyone watching right now, we are here with legendary concert photographer Robert M. Knight. Robert, I guess one thing I really want to talk to you about is how you've been able to give back so much of yourself beyond just your photography skills to the music world and the industry as a whole. From what I understand, you've actually been kind of tagged to identify young talent coming up in the music world today. Talk to me a little bit about that.
There was a documentary that had come out about 10 years ago, or about 8 years ago, on my life, and I've got all my friends in it. Jeff Beck's in it, Slash is in it, Def Leppard, you name it, they're all in it. And I got original music from Stevie Ray Vaughan, from Jimi Hendrix. So it's actually one of those documentaries where you'll actually hear the music from the era.
Cool.
Everybody was my friend. We got a pretty good deal on all the music. Wow. And so the director was sort of a young guy that didn't know that much about music, which at first I was sort of taken back by, because I'm like, well, I'm working with a guy that didn't know the difference between Keith Moon or Keith Richards, And so, but then he kind of pushed the envelope because of that, and he wasn't intimidated by filming any famous people. And then he asked me if I could still find people that nobody had ever heard of.
Okay.
So I said, sure. So I happened to be in Australia. I don't remember why I was there, but I met a manager that had a band called Sick Puppies, and I convinced him they needed to come to LA. And he said, well, we don't know anybody. And I said, well, you know me. So he came to LA, the band came up, I worked with them, they're in my movie, and we dropped the album on Jay Leno the day the record came out, and then Jay Leno let us film that, and that's in the documentary.
Wow.
So I actually it's sort of a show and tell of how to make it as a band, what you got to do. And then I found a very young guitar player in Honey Grove, Texas, named Tyler Dow Bryant, who a lot of people know because he's opened probably for 30 to 50 Guns N' Roses ACD shows in the last 2 years, and an Irish band called The Answer. So when the movie came out, it was on PBS, it was on Netflix, it was on Apple TV, it won 4 film festivals. I started getting emails from young artists saying, can you help me like you helped Tyler Bryant? So I was like, wow. Maybe there's something there. And so I went to Guitar Center, and I went to Fender and Ernie Ball, and I said, guys, there's an opportunity here. The guitar is a kind of disappearing instrument because of digital. Kids don't want to spend 5 years, 6 years to get good. They can buy something at Guitar Center, go home and make music tonight on a beatbox or some electronic thing, right? Wow. So the impetus to be good at something, to learn the guitar, to learn a keyboard instrument is not there anymore. So what I was trying to do is to sustain that wonderful musicianship thing. And so I created something called the Brotherhood of the Guitar. Okay. And I basically was funded, and I literally went around the world looking for young savant male and female guitar players.
Okay.
I have found a lot of. And to give you an example, 2 of the people I was working with are now in Shania Twain's band.
Oh, no kidding.
Wow. My recommendation. One of them was an 18-year-old drummer that I was working with. And people that were out on tour with Dave Stewart, and that were in the house band on America's Got Talent. So the industry looks at my website, and I shine the light on these kids, and then they get picked off. They awesome. Form bands, they form relationships, they write with each other. So it's a very successful thing. But the biggest problem with most of these kids is that there's nobody in their hometown as good as they are. So I created a kind of database of young drummers.
Awesome. Very cool.
that actually fits with the young guitar players. So, and one of those kids that I found was the amazing Jacob Reese Thornton.
Yes, sir. Jacob Reese Thornton, yes.
Who is one of those people. I mean, every once in a while, I meet a lot of people, meet a lot of players, right. But every once in a while you meet somebody that's the complete package where it's the look, sing, songwrite, and play. They have all of it.
He's got chops.
And you could be the greatest guitar player in the world, but if you're playing on a crap song, well, what good is that? You could shred like a crazy man, but that's not a song. Right. There's no melody. People don't leave a concert humming, your song when you shred for 20 minutes on the guitar. So it's that idea that it's the song, stupid. That is the most important thing, right? So Jacob is one of those kids. So I've helped him. I've helped him meet other kids. I've helped Lyric Dubie. I've helped a young female singer out of Seattle, now in LA, named Bexley, whose new single is out yesterday. And there's quite a few of these young artists. And then I try to create concerts where they can come and play. And then, I almost was, I don't really want to let the cat out of the bag, but there was a very major artist that I had an opportunity for Jacob to open for, but at the last minute, we just couldn't pull the production thing together. But it would have been like one of those things that could have just been mind-numbing for him and the world for the exposure. But, you're going to see some of that happen soon.
Yeah. Well, I know he's got some cool stuff coming up. I know at the end of the month, there's the American Diabetes Association down there in Florida. And I know he's going to be opening for, Bruce Kulick. And of course, Todd Kearns and Brent Fitz, they're all going to be involved with that. So that's pretty cool. Because, again, you talked about Slash earlier and, having, worked with him a number of times.
I've known Slash since day one. And Slash was very key in my documentary. And Slash has been very key in helping a lot of these young kids, particularly Tyler Bryant. And the other night, Slash played Phoenix on the tour. It was probably the second date of the new tour with the Conspirators. Right. And Jacob flew out to Phoenix. And we all went to see Slash, and he doesn't do the meet and greet thing, and he doesn't like to come out after the show, but he knew I was there. He let me shoot the entire show, but he asked Jacob to come in before the show. And so Jacob came in and walked down a hallway, and there he saw Slash with a Les Paul around his neck with the top hat on, and didn't ask for a photo, didn't ask for an autograph, because I said, when you come into a room with these people, you got a right to be there just as much as they do. Because you're a musician, you're an artist, you might be young, but there's an equality there. And they hit it off, and then he got to meet Todd and Brent, who he's going to be playing with in about a week, because I think they have asked him to jam a couple songs with Bruce Kulick and the gang. Not bad for a 15-year-old.
that is no, not at all. And I mean, I just think, Robert, it is so amazing, not just what you've done in your career as a photographer, but again, the way you give back, the way you've helped these young artists. It's just incredible. One thing, I guess, parting thoughts, because I know you got to go, you've got a busy schedule, and thank you again so much for your time. But is there anyone at this stage of your life, at this stage of your career, is there anyone that you haven't worked with that you would like to work with?
Well, I never worked with Pete Townsend, funny enough. We just never were in the same place at the same time, though I've met Roger many times, had breakfast with Roger, but I've never worked with him. But the one person I really wanted to work with, who was reaching out to me for about a year saying, would you like to shoot me? Would you like to shoot me? And we kept trying to put it together, was Chris Cornell. And, his camp reached out to me and said, we've noticed you've never worked with Chris. Would you like to shoot Chris? So I have 4 or 5 emails exchanged trying to set that up, but I never heard back from them, in the end. And then all hell broke loose, So
I'm still not over that one, Robert. That's one I will never get over. I'm not going to get over that one, man. Then
Stevie Ray Vaughan, that was very sad because he was a friend and he invited me for that special concert where we were going to do a poster with Eric Clapton and everybody. And there was a whole psychic thing that was going on for 2 days. But anyway, in the end, he got into a helicopter he wasn't meant to be on.
Yeah.
And he told me, because it was a sort of morbid conversation for 2 days, but he said to me, listen, if anything ever happens to me, you'll know me when you hear me. So when I heard Kenny Wayne Shepherd, when I heard Tyler Bryant, when I heard Johnny Lang, I thought, well, there he is. He's coming through Dahl Bramall. He's coming through these cats.
Right on. So, right on. So what is the next adventure for Robert M. Knight. Where are you going? What's going on? What's the big thing on the agenda?
There's no publicity on it yet, but in about a week, the new reopening of the Guitar Center Hollywood is going to be launched, and I think we're going to start the Rock Walk program again, and we're going to be putting major artist hands in cement. There's already 400 of them there. I've been the official photographer and co-director for 33 years in November.
Wow.
And we're going to reinstitute that. So there's some exciting A-list artists that are going to be there. And, looking forward to helping Jacob and others launch their career.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be fun watching Jacob Reese Thornton evolve, because like you said, he's just a 15-year-old kid right now. But,
just really quick, when I was young, when I was shooting these bands, don't forget Mick Taylor was 15 years old playing with John Mayall. Wow. Steve Winwood was 14 years old when he sang I'm a Man for Spencer Davis. Peter Frampton was 15 years old playing with Camel and had gone into Humble Pie. It's not an extraordinarily unusual age to have been in the business. But Bill Wyman used to have to sneak Peter Frampton into gigs because he was too young. And he was helpful. Bill Wyman, who I got to know years later through Jeff Beck, he was always supporting these young guys, And then Elton John was like 17, 18 years old, and he got to play with some really major people in England, and that helped him break through. So there's always been this tradition. Buddy Guy with Quinn Sullivan. Quinn Sullivan's one of my Brotherhood kids. Okay. Quinn was 11 years old when I put him in my Brotherhood, which is extremely young, but he was touring the world with Buddy Guy at the time. So,
Amazing. Well, Robert, thank you again so much for your time. It has been an honor. It truly has. And I can't wait to, share this conversation with the public, man. This is absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.